Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. My name is Sarah Whitmore. I'm from a small town in Georgia, and I was supposed to die quietly. That's what they planned. That's what he wanted. But here's the truth no one tells you: sometimes, when people bury you, they forget you were a seed. You don't get to come back now. I roared, stepping between him and the porch I built with my bare, bleeding hands. You left me here to rot. You don't get to stand here acting like you care. He laughed, the same smug, twisted smirk he wore the day he slammed the front door and never looked back. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. You're fine now, aren't you? Look at all this. He gestured at the house, the land, the barn-turned storefront, the flowers blooming defiantly along the path he once cursed as worthless dirt. You're damn right I'm fine, I snapped, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief. In spite of you. You didn't lift a finger when I got sick. You didn't even look back when I was coughing blood into rags. And now you're here for what? My money? That money, he said, stepping forward like he still had authority here, was half mine before you decided to play martyr. Don't forget whose name is still on the papers. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. Because this man, who left me in a crumbling house with no heat, no groceries, and a diagnosis I couldn't pronounce, thought he was entitled to anything but my silence. You let your mother tell you I was dead weight. She said I'd just fade quietly, and you nodded like it made sense. Like I wasn't your wife. My chest heaved. You abandoned me. His jaw clenched. Don't turn this into a soap opera, Sarah. You were sick. I was overwhelmed. No, I hissed. You were cowardly. And now you're greedy. He looked at the porch swing where I used to sit wrapped in blankets, trying to stay warm while my body broke down. Then his eyes followed the new gutters, the hand-stained siding, the fresh windows I installed one aching afternoon at a time. Where'd you get the money, huh? I know you didn't have anything when I left. I stepped closer, until we were toe-to-toe, fury rising like fire in my throat. I built it. From the soil you said would bury me. From this house you abandoned like garbage. I grew herbs. Made oils. Sold tinctures. And I did it all while learning to walk again. You left me with nothing but the echo of your footsteps, and that silence turned into something beautiful. He scoffed, his ego bruised. You think you're better than me now? I didn't answer right away. I looked up at the roof I repaired alone. At the wind chimes I made out of broken glass and copper wire. At the flower beds planted in my darkest hour. Then I looked him square in the eye. No. I know I am. And that's when he snapped. You ungrateful little, he spat, reaching for the folder under his coat. You think this is over? You'll be hearing from my lawyer. You owe me, Sarah. You think just because you got lucky and found someone to bankroll your little Etsy side hustle. Don't you dare talk about him, I growled, cutting him off. You don't get to say his name. Not after what you did. His face twisted. So it's true then? You moved on? I nodded. I moved forward. There's a difference. He shook his head like the reality was finally catching up to him, like he never believed I'd actually survive, let alone thrive. You were supposed to break, he muttered. I stepped back onto my porch, and gripped the railing I carved by hand. You didn't leave a broken woman. You left a woman under pressure. And pressure doesn't destroy, it transforms. He took one last look around, at everything he could have had, at the life he tossed aside for comfort, for status, for his mother's cold, poisonous voice in his ear. Then he walked away. No final words. Just the crunch of his boots fading down the gravel road. And I let him go. Because the past only has power if you drag it into your future. So many people wait for an apology that'll never come. For justice that never arrives. But sometimes, healing doesn't mean confrontation, it means construction. Rebuilding. Reclaiming. Rising. They told me I would fade. Instead, I became someone they could never erase. They buried me thinking it was the end. But I bloomed. If someone's ever tried to write your ending for you, don't let them. Rewrite it yourself. Rebuild, even if your hands shake. Because the best revenge isn't revenge. It's rebirth. The day he left, it wasn't storming outside, but it sure felt like it inside me. I stood barefoot in the cold kitchen, one hand on the counter to steady myself, the other clutching the diagnosis I had barely begun to understand. Lupus. Severe. And progressive. My joints ached, my muscles felt like jelly, and my chest burned every time I tried to breathe. I thought he'd be scared with me. I thought we'd face it together. Instead, he sighed like I'd just told him I misplaced his favorite jacket. I can't do this, he muttered, rubbing his temples like I was the burden. I'm not built for this kind of life, Sarah. You know that. I remember blinking at him, slowly. I thought maybe I misheard. That he was talking about a job, not a marriage. That he'd come over to hold me, cry with me, promise me we'd figure it out like all those vows we whispered meant something. But no. You're saying, you're leaving me? I choked out, voice as thin as my body had become. He didn't even have the decency to cry. Just a shrug. I've been talking to my mom. She thinks it's better if you have space. If you just rest and focus on whatever treatment you need. Alone. Alone? My heart broke like glass hitting tile. You mean here? In this house that's falling apart? We don't even have heat half the time, Ben. That's not my fault, he snapped. You stopped working months ago, Sarah. What am I supposed to do, watch my life shrivel up alongside yours? I remember reaching for the table, my fingers barely holding me upright. So that's it? The second I stop being useful, I'm disposable? He looked down. This place is bad for me. I need to get back on track. My mom said she'd let me stay in the guest room for a while. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fall at his feet and beg him to love me again, but even then, something inside me whispered, don't you dare beg a man who just threw you away. I cooked for you every night, I whispered. Even when my hands were too sore to hold a spoon. I washed your clothes when my back felt like it would snap. I still kissed your forehead and told you I loved you when I could barely speak. He didn't respond. Just grabbed his bag and walked toward the door. And just before it slammed shut behind him, I heard him say, just rest, Sarah. Fade quietly. We'll talk later. For 3 days, I didn't move. I laid curled up on the couch in the same sweater I'd worn for a week, trying not to breathe too deeply because the pain was so intense. My fever spiked. The roof started leaking again. I had no food in the fridge but some frozen peas and expired milk. The house moaned at night, cracks in the floor, whispers in the walls like even the house missed his footsteps. And yet. He never called. Not once. But there's a strange clarity that comes in your darkest hour. Lying there, I saw the ceiling that needed patching. The busted heater. The broken railing. I saw the overgrown backyard, the patch of soil I once dreamed of. Planting lavender in, the cracked pots in the shed. All the things I once said, maybe next spring. Well, spring wasn't coming. So I stood up. Or at least, I tried to. My legs gave out the first time. And the second. But by the third time, I crawled to the shed. Dragged a rake back in. That was the first day I worked. Just clearing dead leaves from the floor of my porch, one trembling stroke at a time. And with each motion, I cried. But not because of pain. Because something shifted inside me. He may have left me. But I was still here. I started small. A local herbalist online had written about tinctures made from rosemary and sage. I had sage growing wild near the woodshed. I made my first oil in a cracked mason jar, using old olive oil from the pantry. I posted it on Etsy, not expecting anything. But it sold. Then it sold again. And then a woman from Asheville emailed me asking if I could make more. I cried that night. Not because I was still alone, but because for the first time I felt like maybe I had something left in me. I named the little shop From the Ashes. Because that's what I was. I fixed that railing with one hand on YouTube and the other holding a hammer. I painted the porch on my knees, pausing every 15 minutes to breathe through the pain. I bartered online for materials. A woman traded me window panes for custom oil blends. Another gave me old books on holistic medicine. Every time I thought about quitting, I remembered the sound of that door slamming. The words he said, "Fade quietly." No. Not me. I wasn't going to fade. I was going to shine. And then one day, while I was packing orders, a man named Eli showed up looking for peppermint balm. His niece had recommended my products. He drove an hour just to find me because I wasn't answering emails fast enough. We got to talking. He stayed to help me organize the barn where I stored herbs. He didn't ask why my hands shook, or why I needed to sit every 15 minutes. He just said, "You built all this? Alone?" I nodded. He said, "Then there's nothing you can't do." And for the first time in years, I believed it. They tried to bury her under silence, sickness, and shame. But she used every broken piece to build something new. The first time Eli stayed past sunset, the world smelled like lavender and rain, and every porch light in town flickered on in silent applause for the way he listened while I spoke. He asked about the twisted beams I still needed to replace, offered to haul reclaimed wood from his cousin's farm, and promised his pickup could handle the weight if my body couldn't. I caught myself smiling, wide, reckless, guilty, because it felt like betraying all the pain that built these walls. But Eli just nodded, tipping his cap, saying a person's heart deserves renovation too, same as any house left sagging in the dark. I almost cried when he said that, because nobody had called my heart worth fixing since the day Ben walked away. So I handed Eli the rusty measuring tape, and together we circled the house like two surgeons planning to save a patient who still had a fighting chance. Eli brought coffee at dawn the next morning, knocking twice so softly the door barely rattled. Unlike Ben, who used to shove his way in like every hinge owed him gratitude, he placed the mug in my trembling hands, and when my knuckles stiffened against the ceramic, he wrapped his own hands around mine until the heat seeped through the pain. No questions, no pity, just presence, like sturdy soil holding a fragile seed. We spent the day sanding floorboards, pausing whenever my breath hitched, laughing whenever the sander screamed louder than my joints. I kept waiting for impatience to surface, for the heavy sigh that always used to follow my slow steps, but Eli matched my pace, even whistling when I needed to rest, as if breaks were part of the music. By sunset, one room gleamed like new, and my lungs ached in the most satisfying way, exhausted but alive. Word about From the Ashes traveled faster than pollen on a May breeze. Soon, Saturday mornings meant cars lined along the gravel lane, customers wandering my garden like a living apothecary. Eli built a simple sign, hand-painted with wildflowers and my shop's name, and hammered it into the earth as though planting a flag for a country reborn. Every sale felt like another brick in the life I was laying, a testament carved from stubborn hope and sleepless nights. But with growth comes shadow. My mother-in-law's voice found me first, slithering through the phone lines on a Tuesday I'd otherwise remember as perfect. She cleared her throat the way one does before serving poison disguised as tea, then asked sweetly how her house was faring these days, whether the charity project still needed masculine oversight. I said the house was flourishing, "Thank you for your concern," and hung up before the venom seeped too deep. Yet my pulse wouldn't settle, because I knew whose footsteps would follow that call. 3 days later, Ben's truck grumbled up the drive like a bad memory chewing gravel. I watched from the porch Eli and I had reinforced, my heart steady, not calm, but anchored. While the man who once vowed forever killed the engine and started toward the steps he'd never earned. He didn't greet me, he surveyed the property the way vultures scan open fields, eyes tallying value in things he hadn't lifted a finger to create. The sign caught his attention, he sneered. From the ashes? Dramatic, Sarah. Always the performer. I felt the old hurt stir, but it didn't own me anymore. I'd outgrown that pain like a snake shedding skin. I'm glad you came, I said, surprising us both. Now you can see the future you forfeited. He laughed, empty as a tin roof in drought. Future? Don't kid yourself. You wouldn't have this place without my investment. Half of it's still mine. I pointed to the porch, the gardens, the storefront windows, things purchased with late-night sales and Eli's quiet hammer. Show me what's yours, Ben. I'll wait. His grin faltered, he reached inside his jacket and produced a crumpled deed, waving it like a warrant. The land is in both our names. Any profit made here is marital property, sweetheart. The word sweetheart hit like spoiled milk, sickening, curdled. But I inhaled slow, drawing strength from the scent of rosemary swirling around us, the herbs I planted the day hope first glimmered. I spoke to my lawyer months ago, I said, each word clipped but calm. When you abandoned a disabled spouse, Georgia law called that constructive desertion. Our divorce was finalized in February. You missed the hearing, remember? Too busy chasing comfort. His face paled under summer sun, he stammered about paperwork, notices, the unfairness of life. I handed him a sealed envelope, copies of every court document, the restraining order request ready if needed. You left me with nothing but a death sentence, I whispered. I turned it into a rebirth. Walk away before you bury yourself instead. Ben's eyes darted past me to the barn, where Eli now stood framed in the doorway, arms crossed, expression steady as granite freshly split. No threats, no bravado, just presence, powerful enough to shift the air. Ben scoffed, muttered something about charity case finding a new wallet, then stuffed the deed back into his jacket. He stepped down the stairs, gravel crunching like brittle bones under his boots. At the edge of the drive, he paused, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of a future forever out of reach, then climbed into his truck and fled the way cowards always do, loud engines, fading fumes, zero courage. When the dust settled, silence bloomed around us, and I realized my hands weren't shaking. They were steady, strong, like the beams Eli and I had installed. Eli walked to me slowly, as though crossing sacred ground, and asked if I was okay. I nodded, feeling something inside click into place, like the final board securing a roof before the rain. Tears threatened, but not of sorrow, of relief, of triumph, of gratitude for every breath still filling these battered lungs. Eli brushed a stray curl from my forehead, then tipped his chin toward the garden. Customers will be here soon. Let's make sure the lavender looks its best. Together we walked between rows of purple bloom, sunlight catching the silver scars on my hands, evidence of struggle turned to strength. For the first time I understood my own story not as tragedy or revenge, but harvest, proof that resilience bears fruit sweeter than any apology. Some storms return, hoping unfinished lightning can strike twice. But a rebuilt soul is not dry timber, it's living oak, roots deep, branches ready to dance with any wind. When the past demands payment, the future can answer with abundance. And in that abundance, the wounded become warriors, the abandoned become architects, the forgotten become unforgettable. Remember, those who walk away from your fires never expect you to rise as the flame. So rise, brighter, higher, unstoppable, and let the smoke spell your name across the sky. They say healing isn't a straight line, well, mine was a dirt road with potholes, switchbacks, and just enough light to keep walking. But I walked it anyway. Every single day. And somewhere between the broken floorboards and blistered palms, between the night terrors and sunrise tincture packing, I became someone I barely recognized. Not a victim. Not a patient. A builder. A businesswoman. A woman with her name on the lips of clients I'd never met, but who swore my balm helped their arthritis, my tea soothed their grief, my story gave them courage. It was more than orders and emails. It was purpose, echoing louder than the pain ever did. And as the business grew, so did I. Eli never tried to fix me. He just showed up, rain or shine, good days and flare days, with a toolbox in one hand and fresh honey in the other. Sometimes we worked side by side. Sometimes I stayed in bed while he reinforced shelves or restocked jars. Once, I caught him reading reviews on my website, smiling like each comment was a verse in a song only he knew. "You built something beautiful," he said, eyes soft, voice steady. I told him I built it because I had to. He said, "Exactly. That's why it's strong." Then came the press feature. A local blogger turned Etsy fan shared my story, From the Ashes, how one Georgia woman turned abandonment into apothecary gold. Within 48 hours, my inbox overflowed. Orders came from California, Colorado, Canada. CNN called. Then a lifestyle magazine. Then a woman who said she ran a women-owned investor network and wanted to talk wholesale. I almost dropped the phone. Me? The girl who once rationed Tylenol like gold? The woman who couldn't get out of bed without a prayer and a heating pad? Now people were flying in just to see me. I should have felt proud. Empowered. And I did. But there was something else creeping in, a quiet fear that maybe all this was too good, too fast. Because my body had started whispering again. Whispers I recognized. It started with the trembling. Just a little shake in my left hand when I tried to cap the tincture bottles. Then the breathlessness. Not after work, but during it. Just 2 flights of stairs left me gasping. The pain, always lurking, came back sharper. I'd seen this before. This was no ordinary flare. This was my body tapping me on the shoulder, reminding me that it still had a say. But I didn't tell Eli. Didn't tell the customers. Didn't tell anyone. Because for the first time in my life, I was more than my illness, and I was terrified of becoming it again. So I pushed harder. Worked longer. Smiled wider. And one morning, while boxing a lavender set for a woman in Minnesota, I passed out cold in my own garden. Eli found me. I woke up on the couch, covered in a blanket, sunlight slipping through the windows we installed together. My chest ached. My mouth was dry. But what broke me was the look in his eyes, not pity, grief. He didn't yell. He just sat beside me and whispered, "Don't hide your hurt from me. Please, Sarah. I want the truth. All of it." So I told him. Everything. The tremors. The fatigue. The scans I'd postponed. The fear that if I slowed down, I'd lose the life I fought so hard to build. He took my hand, steadying the shake, and said something I'll never forget. "This business? This land? It's amazing. But you're the miracle. And I'm not in love with what you built. I'm in love with the woman who built it." The next day, I called the doctor. 3 scans, a dozen tests, and one long diagnosis meeting later, I had the truth I feared. My condition was progressing again. Not terminal. Not untreatable. But I'd need to rest more. Cut back on work. Start a new round of meds. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had finally climbed out of the hole, only to be told to slow down before I fell back in. I stood on the porch that night, staring at the sign that bore my shop's name. From the Ashes. I whispered the words like a promise. If I rose once, I could rise again. But this time I wouldn't do it alone. We brought on help, local women, most of them older, many retired, all passionate about herbs and healing. I trained them myself. Gave them hours that fit their lives. Together, we turned my one-woman apothecary into a community effort. Eli built them a break room in the barn. I watched them laugh over tea where I used to cry in silence. And something shifted in me. This wasn't just my business anymore. It was ours. Then, one quiet morning, Eli sat beside me on the porch, slipped a tiny velvet box from his coat, and opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a silver ring, engraved with the words still standing. He didn't ask for a future. He honored the fight that brought me to this one. And I said yes, without hesitation, without fear. Because loving someone who sees all of you, even the broken bits, is the most radical kind of healing. She didn't wait for life to make room for her. She carved space with her own hands. Splinters, bruises, scars and all. And when her body whispered slow down, she listened without giving up. She adapted. She reached out. She shared the dream. Because resilience doesn't mean doing it all alone. It means knowing when to rise, and when to rest in someone's arms. The last time Ben showed up, he didn't have a deed in his hand. He had a camera crew. I was halfway through teaching a workshop, 10 women seated in folding chairs under the barn awning, notebooks open, lavender bundles at their feet, when I heard the sound of tires on gravel and saw him step out of a black SUV in a collared shirt and fake humility. A local TV station. Some second chances special about starting over. He told them he used to live here, that he helped start the business, and that after everything, he just wanted to reconcile. He didn't come back for me. He came for credit. I stood still for a moment, watching the old version of him parade across land he hadn't touched in years. He was smiling for the cameras, nodding like he'd been through something hard. Like he had survived something. But I wasn't that trembling woman on the porch anymore. I wasn't the wife abandoned in her worst moment, choking back tears and Tylenol. I wasn't the girl hoping someone would save me. I was the storm. And I was done being quiet. I walked toward him with my shoulders back, my breath calm, my hands inked with herbs and healing. One of the cameramen spotted me and whispered, "Is that her?" Ben turned like I was the climax of his redemption arc. "Sarah," he said, giving the camera his side profile. "I was just telling them how far this place has come. How proud I am. Maybe we could do a quick interview together, talk about how we built this dream." I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give out of politeness. The kind you give when you know you've already won. "You didn't build anything, Ben," I said. My voice didn't crack. It carried, loud, clear, rooted. "You left." I turned to the camera, and for the first time, I told the whole truth. I was sick. And he left. I was broke. And he disappeared. When this house had no roof, he slammed the door. When I was coughing up blood, he said I should fade quietly. The crew froze. Ben's face flushed like someone just switched on the truth. I took one step closer. But I didn't fade. I fought. I built. I grew this business from the ground, from dirt he thought would bury me. I planted my own name in this soil. And I watered it with everything he left behind, my pain, my grief, my fury. Now, I continued, my voice steady as the sunrise, he wants to come back for the story. For the spotlight. For the ending. I shook my head. No. This isn't your ending, Ben. It's mine. And with that, I turned around and walked back to my class. I didn't even flinch when the camera stayed behind. Because some stories don't need an audience. They just need to be lived. That moment, right there, wasn't revenge. It wasn't public humiliation. It was closure. The kind that doesn't demand applause. I wasn't bitter. I was done. The following spring, we held our first Community Harvest Festival, an open garden celebration of healing, growth, and local makers. Hundreds came. Some bought products. Others just walked the paths, sipping tea and breathing in peace. Kids laughed in the wildflower maze. Elders sat in rocking chairs under shade trees I planted the year I nearly gave up. And there, at the edge of the booth I once ran alone, stood Eli, wearing the same flannel he wore the first time he helped me fix a beam. Only now, he wasn't holding a hammer. He was holding our daughter. Born the month I turned 40. A miracle I never thought my body could carry. And yet, there she was. Tiny fingers wrapped around my pinky like she already knew what strength lived in these hands. I still get flare-ups. Still have days where the world moves too fast and my body moves too slow. But now, I don't apologize for needing rest. I honor it. Because healing isn't about pretending you're invincible. It's about knowing where your power lies, and knowing that sometimes, power means pausing. The shop runs with 6 women now. All of them once overlooked. All of them fierce. We don't just sell herbs. We teach women how to grow their own. We mentor teen girls. We host moonlight markets for small-town artists. We tell stories out loud that were once only whispered. And we do it all from the house they said would crumble. This isn't just a comeback story. This is a becoming story. She didn't rise to spite him. She rose to remember who she was. She didn't just heal, she helped others do the same. She didn't chase revenge. She lived so well it became the loudest answer. Sometimes, the best thing you can say to someone who left you behind is nothing at all. Let your life speak. Let your light shine. Let your growth grow louder than their absence. Because the most powerful revenge is never needing them again. If you've ever been left behind, written off, or told to fade, don't wait for them to come back and recognize your worth. Build. Grow. Heal. Rise. You are the ending they never saw coming. And the beginning of something far greater. Start today.